Another point is that because you see higher death rates, you also actually see an accelerated aging in a sense by the injections. And the injections would accelerate for older people the aging rate by 2 to 3 times, which means that for an injected person of age 60, let's say, or 50, 1 year is as much aging as 2 to 3 years for a non-injected person. At least that's the way I interpret the data. And again, I have graphs about that.
And is that only for the older people, let's say starting from age 50 or so, or can you observe something similar for younger people too?
Well, the graph, if you want, I can show them, but the graph, the natural aging graph with age as a function of, so the rate of aging as a function of age is an exponential. So the older you get, the faster you age. So there is a natural acceleration of aging with age, and that thing increases again. So the exponent of that exponential gets higher from 7 to 9, let's say, with the injection rate. And this affects the aging rate that is very low when you're very young. And it affects even more the aging rate when you're old.
Can you show that graph?
Yes, of course. So here you have, in blue, you have the data for 2020. It's the death rate as a function of age for the USA. And in orange, you have the same for 2020 for New Zealand. And you see that people in New Zealand, for the same age class, die less than in the USA. And you have an exponential that describes these curves that you see. These are real data, even if they look so smooth. It's because these results are very clear. And it tells you that the exponent between the USA and New Zealand are not the same. At age 80, you see a huge difference between age rates in the USA versus New Zealand. They die a lot of times faster in the USA than in New Zealand. And it's saying a lot. And that's simply how it is or was in 2020. It says a lot about the quality of life, of course. And you already see these effects much earlier, even at age 40, and probably before at very young ages, but you don't see them because the differences are so small, and I would have to play with the scales to show it to you.
Right.
So when I take the data and I do play with the same data, the same graph that you just saw, but I play with the scale, and now the scale is logarithmic. So you see the separation between the blue USA and the orange New Zealand data. And you see it also at very young ages, and you already see a big difference.
That's true. Very young.
Yes,
Like
it starts really young.
teenagers.
Maybe for very young people, it's not. And New Zealand has a small population, so you're not going to see much. But after age 10 and 20, you already have a huge difference.
Wow, yeah, amazing.
And
That's
then
really big.
later on in life, if you go back, you see it better. So we were looking at this part before, but after you see it very well. So now when we go to the injections, so here we have each dot is a different batch, and each batch was on average injected to people of different ages. And in orange is a theoretical death rate, that is for that age group injected by that batch, what is the expected death rate using these orange data, which were the death rates per age in New Zealand in 2020, only that this is now 21 and 22, and you get some kind of expected death rate. But in blue are the actual death rates from the very young leaked data. And you see basically the same as you had, qualitatively the same as you had when you were comparing the USA. I mean, it's simply the injections increase the death rates per age, which is something we knew. And when we do this analysis, so the exponents that you have here for the orange data, the exponent is 0.07. And for the blue data, after 2 injections, that's 0.11.
It's a huge difference.
One of the results that I published in early 24, I think, or late 23. I don't remember when exactly. And it means that injections accelerate the annual mortality rate, and which you can call it or interpret it as aging rate, the rate of aging. And yes, so we can go back. That's one of the most important results that I had, which is some people told me I cannot forward to my big audience this result. How can we say something like that? People are going to commit suicide. Okay, so that there is someone who told me that thing.
Oh, really?
And it's one of my most important results, and it is maybe one of the least publicized one.
Well, it's an extremely important result, and you have a look at this graph, and there shouldn't be a doubt in anybody's mind that what is needed is to stop all these shots.
So,
and it shows how deadly
unfortunately,
they
I'm
are.
forced to say something a bit less pessimistic.
hmm
We see that in the first 2 years after the shots. I'm not sure that this effect is long-term. It could be, but we don't have data like those from Barry Young for 2024, 2025. It might be that the blue line returns to the orange line or intermediate. So it might be that there is no long-term effect, that you see an increased rate of death, an acceleration of aging for 2-3 years after the shots, but not after 5 years, and maybe not after 10 years. Remember that. We remember also that, yes, this is increased death rate, and we assume it might also mean increased aging, but these two things are not necessarily 100% correlated. So it might mean that if you didn't die, you're not affected. It could mean that, but it doesn't necessarily mean that. Yeah, it might mean that your physiological age is greater or much faster. You aged physiologically faster than if you were not injected. That's very possible, but it's not 100% sure. Then the other thing is that via shedding, it's possible that after 2-3 years, the non-injected get the same as the injected people. And then it means that they also same or close to the two. So it could mean that they would be between the blue and the orange line, and that it's not so. So all these options are possible, and they all tell you, yeah, well, what Hervé finds is very important, and there should have been more studies done, meaning Hervé should have gotten the next data continuing this, and I didn't get them, of course. Barry Young went to prison. I don't know if he still is in prison, but he went to prison for giving me these data. He didn't give them to me personally, but basically it's what others did with it.
So Barry Young, he was the leaker who leaked the New Zealand insurance data. I assume he worked for an insurance company in New Zealand?
I suppose either that or a governmental
Wow,
thing.
what a great guy. So he leaked the data, and then he was prosecuted for the leaking and went to prison. Do you know for how many years?
I don't know.
Since then, there has been no more leaks, and we just don't know what the data
No
says.
leaks that I could use that way. No. And I want to remind, because we speak of someone who is in prison for not the same reasons, but actually similar ones, who is a German-American lawyer who is since over 2 years now, I think, in prison, and was a long time in very hard solitary confinement situation. You probably know him, right?
Rainer Füllmich.
Rainer Füllmich. Füllmich or Füllmilch?
Füllmich. So
Okay.
MICH.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I always think of milk.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah. But anyways, so and this guy is still not out of prison. I think since a few months he's in less bad conditions, let's say it. But that's it. So, and that was his first point. He was saying PCRs are wrong. And that was his very big deal. And that you can see here. is a publication that we did in 22, late 22, where we looked at Luxembourgish data on PCRs. And Luxembourg has a very special thing that because the country is small, every positive PCR, the same sample was retested within 24 hours in our national reference lab.
Wow, that's fascinating.
And we didn't know it. So when early in 22, a friend of mine, Romain Bernard, discovered that, he said, I don't want these data to be leaked around, especially if a test is being done on these data, on that sample that I didn't even know about, and I don't know about the results. So he did a lot of work to learn how to deal with that. And in the end, using freedom of information principles or laws, he did get his results for his 2 or 3 positive tests. And he saw that at least one, I don't remember, 1 or 2 of his tests were negative the next day or the same day. But he had been asked to stay 10 days at home and so on. So he was very angry. If someone knew that he was negative the same day, why did he stay twice 10 days at home?
So why is it that they retested it after 24 hours?
Well, that was something they did for their reasons, and that's a very good question. We didn't care. What we care about, but you're right, we should care, is that, people, we cared about getting our results, right? And especially correcting with a second test. Why they did it? Maybe they wanted to check their results. They claim, and that is their official reason. But after that, they changed the answers that they said, and they say, well, we retested it because we wanted to be sure it was worthwhile sequencing the virus, which is not the same, right? It's not about confirming your diagnosis. It's about checking if there is enough virus to sequence it. That's not the same thing.
Yeah, I mean, checking doesn't make sense anyway, because, I mean, if you want to check it to make sure that the result was correct, and you find out that the result was not correct, that, for example, the person is negative, doesn't have COVID, then you would let that person know as soon as possible. And they didn't do that.
No, they didn't. What after Roman for English speakers, that he discussed it with us, and then I wasn't so much, they told me about, but I wasn't implied in that part of the job. They took everybody among our friends who had a positive test, and everyone was asked to repeat the long administrative work to get the result of his second test. And in the end, we had in total about 120 people who got that second result. And we saw that, so on the background of a first positive test, we get a retest test. And the retest is in over 80% of the second tests negative. It was
80%?
Yes, over 80%.
My God, right.
And we publish it, meaning we send it to all the newspapers in Luxembourg, to the High Court. I think it's the High Court, and all our deputies, the whole government. And that was in September 22. And we do not get any answer, any reaction, anyone, anything. So it's like we didn't do it, literally like we didn't do it. No one speaks about it. But continue gathering answers, because people were still asking anyways. So there were people in the process. And all the answers that we got after that date that we sent it to all the instances in the country, which, as everybody knows, is very small, they changed. So none of the answers said PCR test was negative. They said, we didn't sequence that one. That's what you see in the cakes that you see. So you have the answers before we published our study, and we have them after. And you see the cakes look very similar, but the answers were not the same. The answers were we sequenced and we did not sequence. They never said PCR test negative. So they literally got our results and they changed the answer so as to be, as you know, the cover-up always is the thing that gets you.
Yes.
And we had a few people, I think it was 14 tests, that people who had gotten an answer in the first period of our study, which was in one case positive and all the other cases negative, they had re-asked. I don't remember why. Maybe we did it on purpose. I don't even remember that.
Yeah, that's a good check to do that again on purpose.
Yeah,
to
and
see.
they got, the positive guy got really the same result.
Right.
And the other ones got, oh no, we didn't
Sequence it.
sequence.
Well, that's well, wow.
So the answer changed.
Yes. So they realized, oh my God, these guys are onto us, and they're more and more asking for this retesting result, and we can no longer give it to them. So they stopped. Yeah, makes total sense. You know, with the retesting, did they do that at a lower cycling rate to get the other results, or how do you explain that?
Well, if we get approximately the same proportions, we can expect that they did the same kind of cycling thing. So probably, I think they said it's positive up to 35 cycles. And as everybody knows, this is really above the limit. So
yeah, way too high.
The real limit might be 34. I mean, when
That's
I
still
did
high.
for other diseases,
Yeah.
for bacteria and so on, when we were doing tests when I was in Marseille by PCR, when we had 34, positive 34, we would say, okay, we repeat the test. And if we get it positive at 32, it's fine. If we get it positive at 35, so it's not fine. And at best, we repeat it a third time. But 34 is not very trustable. And actually, many people say above 30, it's not very trustable. The probability of having a false positive result increases the higher your cycle level. And at 30, you're already quite high. Okay? That's part of the thing. I mean, that's the explanation. And there are other explanations. I did write something about it with the same authors, and I have published it on ResearchGate in French, German, and in English. So what you see here, which is in French, you will find a whole publication describing these results and my explanations around it. And actually, we found that some German publications and also very early French publications from my previous lab in Marseille got very similar results, and that they published them, or the French ones, already in 2020. And we didn't know about it up to a week ago. So that's telling you a lot about it. So you see how the channeling of the information, that it doesn't reach everybody. Even the bad information reaches everybody, and very important information that is up to 5 years old didn't reach us, including us who were very interested. You, Cornelia, never heard about me before months ago.
Right. Go ahead.
And actually, if you look at the first publication I did on this Israeli data, I got really famous beginning 21 about it, but there was no follow-up. This first publication saying, okay, after the shot, you die from COVID much more. This reached millions of people already in 21, because we had published it in Hebrew at the time, and some person from Russia translated it into Hebrew and sent it to us meaning Chaim Yativ, who had done it with me, and it was published on his small site. And that guy had seen it in Russian, so it was translated from either English, French, or German, or Hebrew into Russian, and then back translated into Hebrew and sent to us without knowing that it was ours.
Amazing.
What is the likelihood that something like that happens?
Yeah.
That means this reached many more people than we knew from the site viewing on his site. That must have been really tens of millions of people. So how come I would not be all the time, there wouldn't be a follow-up, an author who publishes that at the beginning? Why wouldn't he be all the time solicited? Each publication I do is like starting from scratch. It's like I'm unknown and maybe it will become by chance known. So, but that's very strange. Something is fishy here.
Yeah, because because what you're finding out is very dangerous, too close to the truth. But I was wondering. I'm thinking about why they might have done this retesting. I mean, one reason might have been that they actually wanted to know the real rate of COVID, and they knew this was just the first PCR test was done at such a high cycling rate that the result was garbage, and pretty much everyone came out positive. So they said, okay, let's do a real test because we are interested in the real numbers. We won't tell anyone, of course, but we would like to know. Maybe that's why they did it.
So here comes another story, which again, I only discussed very recently with another friend of mine and of yours, Pierre Aubertin, and also Luxembourger. And he said already over 1 or 2 years ago, he told me it's strange that we have so few very bad adverse effects in Luxembourg relatively to other countries. We discussed, and he asked me because we know since we are teens, okay? And he knew that I was biologist, so we were discussing it. And he told me maybe because of my result about the New Zealand data about delays between successive vaccinations, he told me, did you know that in Luxembourg, they said you should wait 4 to 5 weeks between successive injections, between first and second injection. And maybe by precaution or because they knew, they tried to minimize the number of adverse events in Luxembourg. Because we have, of course, adverse events, but not so many. We have, of course. And I mean, if the delay is longer, that doesn't mean you won't have any adverse effects. You will simply have fewer. But and we came up, I mean, these are our speculations, and especially from Pierre, he says maybe these people in some way are trapped into a situation where they have to play, but they try to minimize the harm in ways that, because they are forced to play that game, but they can play at least on the delay. They are told you have to get everybody injected as many times as you can, but they can say, okay, delay it by 3 weeks. And that way, so the situation, and I'm not saying that to discount anyone, but it means it's a very complex situation. So we have everybody playing with, but probably trying somehow to be for his own conscience. They try to save their soul in some way, and also themselves, by the way. I mean, there is not everybody, and probably very few people had really the intention, but they played the game. And you see that result, these 2 cakes that you see on your screen. We send it to everybody important in Luxembourg, and no one spoke about it.
What about media? You must have sent it to lots of media.
Well, we sent it to the media, as you hear. There was one party who did, which is about the same as the ADR in Germany, but in Luxembourg, who did some questioning, but it wasn't, and it was much later and so on. It had no effect anyways. And I'm not sure they did the questioning in the right way from my point of view. So we are going to go on with further falsifications. And this falsification is a very nice one again. So these are the data as they look on Euromomo. And this is a graph that shows you since 2019, the death rates for all ages. It's not the death rate, it's the total number of deaths that you get since 2019 until 2025. And you see a very high peak in spring 20, and then an actually much larger peak in winter 20 to 21, and then still something in 22 and in 23. And then in 24 and 25, we are back to what seems to be normal. But in winter 24 to 25, we were told that there was an excess mortality due to winter mortality due to the flu. But there isn't, according to Euromomo. And we were told that in Europe, they were telling that in the newspapers. That's why I prepared that graph. There was a contradiction between the Euromomo data, and which maybe were wrong, maybe they were true, right? Or maybe this excess mortality thing that we saw in the newspapers was wrong, meaning they were trying to push people to get injected.
Mm-hmm.
And because they were seeing that people were not getting injected anymore, thanks to not only me, of course, but somehow all the people talking about it, or even people understanding it on their own. So this is somehow here, these data from Euromomo were okay. And now we are going to a falsification from Euromomo. That's the next story.
Oh, can we go back to the other graph, because I have a question about that?
Yes,
for
of
you.
course, we are back.
If we look at these spikes here, for all the years 25, 24, 23, 22, 21, they tend to be in the winter. These are the winter months, like December, January, February, something like that.
Yes.
Right? But for the year 2020, it's very interesting. There's very low mortality in the winter. Look at December, January, February, and then it kind of shoots up in March.
Yeah, because they refused to treat people who had flu-like symptoms, and they told them, remain at home. Your point is very important, and doctors talk about it and me less. But yeah, so they said you stay at home, you stay until you get these very bad effects, like you're almost dead, right? And then you will be treated. And that will make that everybody who is a bit old or fragile or obese or that dark-skinned will have a higher risk of dying. Of course, a combination of all that. And at that time, that's another falsification, a very long-term falsification. What I said about dark skin, I didn't know that before that period. I did not know. I had observed, and since years I was asking myself, why all these animals, birds and mammals, the more you go north, the more white they become, right?
The more what they become?
White, I mean.
White.
Their colors become more bleak, right? That's true for humans. That's true for, I don't know, hares, for foxes and so on. Independently, you see that. And in humans, you see it independently in Asia as well as in Europe. And the question is why? It's strange because in adaptive terms, the adaptation on the color is not that strong about, camouflage and so on. That's very weak effect, if at all. And that's the time where we learn that actually, if you're very white, even with less sun, you can develop more vitamin D despite having less sun. That's the reason all these animals become bleaker the more north you go, because there is less sun. So that's a huge, of course, natural selection effect, right? You have a huge advantage if you get more vitamin D, because you die much less in winter from all these flu-like diseases.
That's right. And that's why black people, when they live, let's say, in Norway or like in Europe, they need to take more vitamin D3 because of the melatonin in their skin. They cannot absorb D.
Exactly. But before 2020, we didn't know that. And doctors didn't know that. Generalists who handle all the people didn't know that. And that's criminal not telling them that, because that fact certainly scientifically was known, but we never heard about it before 2020, where it was obvious. Because already in March, April, we were seeing, among all the people who developed the very serious COVID, they were seeing mainly immigrants from Africa, more dark-skinned people. And then people started saying about socio-economic stuff, but it wasn't that. It's about the vitamin D deficiency that we as Europeans, let's say inborn indigenous Europeans, if we develop some deficiency, it will be in February, March. And of course, but if you're dark skinned, yeah, you develop it already in November, December. That's what it means. So your risk of having a serious disease is much higher.
Makes sense. Yeah.
And the fact that this scientific fact is not taught in every biology and medical school is basically criminal. It's on purpose. And then using all kinds of tricks about racism and so on. It's not about racism. If you have melanin in your skin, you will absorb less sun.
And here in the United States, people who ended up in the hospitals for COVID, they were not even given vitamin D3. It was refused. Even if they asked for it, it was not given to them.
And that's the reason for that huge peak in March 2020. It's basically that. Non-treatment, mistreatment, and then even worse because people were treated with very bad stuff like, I don't remember these whatever false treatments they were using, but simply telling someone who is 60 and overweight, stay at home until you're extremely bad. So if he was a bit bad and he was getting zinc and vitamin D, probably nothing would have happened or nothing very bad, but he got into the hospital under oxygen and then survived it. Okay. That's my cousin, right? And he's like the normal guy from here around. So what is called a good looking guy, over 6 point something feet and over 240, 50 pounds, the good looking German guy, right? Like the girls here love. But so but actually it was a bit problematic for him. But yeah, so that peak you're asking really the good questions because I didn't plan on discussing this, but because it's not the kind of things that I deal with, as you understand. But yeah, that's what I learned too. And it tells you that there is a lot of stuff that is criminal and criminally designed since a very long time. This vitamin D thing that we didn't know, that's not okay.
No, absolutely not. To come back to this small peak in the winter of the year 2020, there was very little compared to the other years, 21, 22, 23, 24, even 25. There was very little mortality, exceptionally little. Don't know why. Do you know Professor Stefan Homburg?
No.
He's an amazing guy. He's an economist. He was a professor for economics somewhere in Germany, and he was fired from his job, I think, in 2021 because he spoke out against what was going on and against the vaccines and did analyze the data, etc. And so they got rid of him. But he has his own channel. I think he's on YouTube and probably on other media, and he gives these lectures. He has been giving these talks, not really lectures, but public talks to people since 2021. And he just gave his last talk. And he pointed out that in February, March 2020 in Germany people weren't sick. There wasn't even this usual peak during the winter. It was very, very low, as you can see here on this chart too.
Yes.
And they were, and in the Robert Koch Institute, the RKI, we know that from the leaks, they were discussing that and saying, don't really have any. There's nothing. Why are we going to lock down? There's nothing to see here. Everything is fine. And they had to, don't tell anyone. Don't let anyone know these data, because if we let the German population know that there's hardly any sickness, then people will ask, well, why are you locking down the country? Why exactly are you doing that? So please don't talk about it.
Well, I didn't know that, and for whatever reasons, maybe because I don't have a job since 2018, no one approached me and telling me, no, don't speak about it. They never tried to directly menace me and never tried to buy me off. But maybe they know since a very long time about me that it wouldn't work.